projected power over the commercial shipping lanes of the world's oceans. That is a necessary component to engage in world trade and to outsource your supply chains to other countries. And this outsourcing, which has taken place since, let's say, frankly, the mid-1980s, but it really accelerated in the 1990s under President Bill Clinton and so on. This created economies of scale. It created a lot of cost efficiencies, and it made a lot of people rich in American industries because they were able to fire the American workers and shut down the American factories and move that production overseas. But when you fast forward to 2024, it creates a situation where the U.S. is so strongly dependent on these supply chains and so strongly dependent on U.S. naval power protecting sea lanes that when a black swan gets thrown into this mix, i.e. Tutti Frutti Hooties, well, I don't mean any disrespect by that. It's just I like to have fun with names, and I'm tired of saying the Hooties, so I call them the ice cream flavor. You know, Tutti Frutti Hooties, they are firing rockets and missiles at ships and cargo vessels, by the way, and they have nullified the United States Navy, which means the United States Navy can no longer protect the sea lanes, which means that U.S. globalization, long supply lines from other countries, that model no longer works reliably. It's dead, actually, turns out. Now, then getting back to the drone wars, who's going to be able to manufacture the drones that will be used in the drone wars to kill the people of the opposing nations? Well, the answer is now obvious. China can make them all domestically because they've got tons of labor, tons of manufacturing, and their own domestic supply chains. Russia can make them domestically because also they're really great engineers at coming up with the new, most advanced models of everything from hypersonic missiles to anti-air defense systems to drones and so on. The U.S. can't make anything. I'm sorry to say. Look, I mean, just as a disclaimer, I'm an American. You know, I love my country. I love what it used to stand for. I'm a Texan. I love Texas. But I got to be honest, America barely makes anything anymore. And America doesn't have the capability to make anything anymore. And I know this because I have companies, I hire people, and I fire people. And I'm very familiar with the job market in Texas and what's available. And I will tell you, there is essentially zero skilled labor available in Texas. Maybe it's better somewhere else, but you cannot find anybody who knows how to do much with machines. And you certainly can't find a machinist. You know, those people are long gone. You'd be lucky to find somebody who can learn how to run, you know, like a capsule filling machine on a line of supplements, which is what we do. We have a lot of manufacturing in our facilities. And it turns out we have to find people, we have to train them from scratch. Nobody has any skills. In America, as far as I can tell, I mean, I'm talking about at that tier of salaries, like, you know, light industry type of workers, there's almost nobody that has any skills left. So even if the U.S. wanted to start manufacturing, let's say, drone swarms in America, even if they had the resources, which they don't have, even if they had the factories, which don't exist, even if they had all the raw materials and everything, there's no labor that can do it. There's no labor.
People watching? What?
And I'll probably get some hate mail for this, but I just want to be honest. Again, I live in Texas, and guess who does all the concrete work in Texas? It's the same people that do all the masonry work. It's the same people that also do all the, well, drywall. They're artisans. They are very sort of hands-on minded. They're also the same people that do all the lawn care, groundskeeping work in Texas. But I've seen this group of people that I will name here in a second, I have seen them do amazing things with concrete and stonework and building stone walls and so on. The vast majority of these people are Hispanic. Occasionally, you'll see an American worker who knows how to do some of these things, but by and large, you never see an American doing it. If you hire somebody to come in and do something with concrete, build a wall, build anything, frankly, it's usually Hispanic workers, often run by an American who is the owner of the company that subcontracts out to the Hispanic workers. That's typically what you see in Texas. And the reason all of this matters, by the way, the Pentagon wants open borders because the Pentagon is gearing up for World War III. The Pentagon knows that they need laborers for the munitions factories that they're currently expanding to try to produce more artillery rounds. They're trying to produce something like 300,000 artillery shells per month in America. You're going to need Hispanic workers to get that done. I can assure you, Hispanic workers, because, and again, I'm not trying to be insulting to the American workers. I'm just telling you the way it is, at least from my observation of Texas. There are no young American workers who will show up and work in a munitions factory. They do not exist. Or maybe they're unicorns, maybe you find one with a unicorn somewhere. But other than that, they do not exist. So if America is going to actually compete in any kind of a global war effort, this could be the manufacture of drones, it could be the manufacture of munitions, artillery shells, what have you, they're going to need masses, and I mean millions, of laborers that the Department of Defense can recruit into their munitions factories. That is why they want open borders. And guess what? They're going to offer not just work permits, because you've seen that most of the jobs created in America over the last, let's say, 9 months have been jobs for illegals who have been given work permission. Okay, so they're not citizens. They're still in limbo. They came across the border illegally, but they've been given work permits by the Biden administration. That's where the job growth is right now. All kinds of articles about that all over the media. The Department of Defense is going to hand out work permits like candy canes to millions of Hispanic workers over the next several years, if things don't collapse first. And you are going to see the military factories in America stacked with Hispanic workers getting paid pretty good wages. And like I said, the Hispanic workers actually, they do a very good job. They are artisans. And they're actually very fast at doing even repetitive jobs. They can get very good and very fast with it. Sometimes they get bored with it and they add flair to it or whatever. You can't blame them. It's boring to do the same thing over and over again. That's why the most impressive Hispanic people that I have seen or that I know are artisans. They're artists with their projects, with concrete or what have you, with masonry, like I said. And by the way, almost all the food production in America is also currently carried out by Hispanic people, Latinos, okay? Some legal, some illegal. But that's where Tyson Chicken gets its chicken. All the chicken meat factories are staffed mostly by illegals. This is why Tyson Foods fired all the Americans in their New York plants, or I forgot where it was, a story a few months ago. They fired huge numbers of American workers and they replaced them with illegal workers who have work permits. Now, just to be clear, as a full disclaimer, what Tyson Foods did, in my opinion, is wrong. If you're not a citizen of America, you shouldn't be working in America. But the Hispanic workers, they are good. They are very good at what they do. And that's why the Department of Defense wants them. And at first, it's going to be have work permits, and then you're going to have high pay, and then it's going to be, and then here's a pathway to citizenship. As long as you work for the Department of Defense for like 10 years or whatever it's going to be, then you can become a citizen. So there's going to be like a green card pathway for millions of workers. Now, the Americans a lot of Americans are going to scream about this and say, how dare those Hispanic workers take our jobs? And yet, there's no Americans that want those jobs. Seriously, they don't want those jobs. They will not work in those factories, in those conditions, around explosives. They won't. I've seen it firsthand. They won't do it. They won't mop a floor. They won't move boxes. I can't even tell you how many Americans I've hired that lasted 2 days in our warehouse. It's crazy. They show up, I'm so happy to get the job. And you're like, okay, we're going to move all these boxes. We're going to unload this pallet. We're going to pack these orders. And they're like, you mean I have to work? Yeah, this is a warehouse. Okay, we move boxes. This is what we do. They're like, oh, like I didn't realize we're going to have to work and stuff, And then they're gone, just gone. And this is a result of the destruction of the culture. This is all an extension of the whole culture where everybody's a winner. Participation trophies for all the kids and football games, and they stop keeping score because everybody's a winner. No more competition is allowed. That's because funny. It's mean. It's mean to make kids compete.
Yeah, trying to get this thing done.
And the parents and the schools end up raising a bunch of snowflakes, just weak American kids. Now, the exception to that is a lot of homeschooled kids that grow up on ranches, farms, and rural areas. They know how to do stuff, by the way. They're the exception, and they are exceptional. And you've seen this if you have kids or grandkids, and you compare homeschooled kids who were hands-on on a ranch, and they milk the cow or whatever, versus public school kids that their whole life is in their phone. Little fingers moving 50 miles an hour on the phone, but they don't know how to do anything in the real world. Like, change a tire? No, you must be kidding me. We don't change tires. Inescapable. So the masses in America are incapable of production. And that's why the GDP in America is mostly financialization and service industry stuff, like fast food workers. But even in California, 10,000 of those workers have lost their jobs since April because of the $20 minimum wage. There, right? All right, so, but big picture, getting back to the big picture, the drone wars are coming, and now hopefully I've established the case here. America can only produce drones. I mean, they're going to have a hard time producing anything, frankly, but if America produces any drones at all, it's going to be Hispanic labor. America won't be able to just call up China and say, send us a bunch of drones in the middle of World War III because, well, China's going to be with Russia. Russia will have its own very impressive production with probably nuclear-tipped drones, Russia knows how to put a nuke on everything. And that's what World War III is going to involve among other exotic weapon systems. But if it gets down to the street level, it's going to be a lot of drones, kamikaze drones, drone warfare, and the U.S. will be outproduced just like that. Now in Moscow, they've just announced that they're cutting off all dollar and euro trades in the Moscow Stock Exchange. So I have a special report on that I recorded earlier. It's about 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to play that special report here. And it gets into why World War III will escalate so rapidly, because this is a winner-takes-all type of competition now globally. This is an existential fight for the future of control over the economy, or economies, plural, of the world. And this is why Russia won't back down, and this is why the United States won't back down. As a result, escalation of conflict is inevitable. So listen to this special report, and we'll be back on the other side. So the Moscow Stock Exchange just announced a ban on all trading in dollars and euros. This is the latest tit for tat, you could say, in response to a new round of economic sanctions from the West, targeting not just Russia, but even Chinese companies that do business with Russia. And what you're actually seeing here, this is why World War III is going to escalate so rapidly. And there's no stopping the escalation. This is almost certainly going to go nuclear. The reason why is because it's shaping up as the final battle between the East and the West. And the winner of this conflict will determine who controls the future economies of the world. In other words, what currency is going to be in play. And as you know, ever since Bretton Woods and mostly the post-World War II era, the US dollar has been the world reserve currency. Virtually all international trading was carried out in dollars. And of course, the Bretton Woods Agreement with the oil-producing nations, especially the Saudis, ensured that oil was sold in dollars and that dollars were therefore tradable for oil. And that ensured that many other countries, and most other countries around the world, would buy dollars in order to get oil because they all need energy for their economies. So this created artificial demand for the dollar. And because of that artificial demand and the number of dollars, the global dollar supply that was in place due to this agreement, it allowed the U.S. to print money and suffer much less of a consequence than if the dollar wasn't the global reserve currency. In other words, the money printing of the U.S. government, well, the Federal Reserve, Treasury, U.S. government, I'm kind of using them synonymously here. Let's say the money printing of the U.S. empire has only been possible because of the world reserve currency status of the dollar, and that status is rapidly collapsing. It's being replaced. We have seen now that Putin announced just recently that 90% of the trade between Russia and China, I believe it was, has been carried out in their own national currencies and not in dollars. Now that means 10% of the trade is still carried out in dollars, but that's ending, by the way. That's ending rapidly. And the fact that the Moscow Stock Exchange just banned all settlements, all trading in dollars and euros, this is a big leap in the direction of East versus West, where the East is going to have nothing to do with the West, and the West is going to have nothing to do with the East in terms of finances and so on. Even though, of course, trading with Russia and buying Russia's very affordable energy has enabled the economic abundance of nations like Germany for many decades. But that's done. That's over. Germany's in an economic collapse. Western Europe is in an economic collapse. And the U.S. thought that they could cut off Russia from the SWIFT system and collapse the Russian economy. They thought they could collapse the Russian currency and even cause a revolt in Russia to overthrow Putin. And they were wrong. They failed. But the reason they thought that is because that's the model that the CIA has carried out, revolutions, first collapse, assassinations, regime change, basically, in other countries around the world for decades. Over 100 such operations were carried out around the world. Many of them failed, by the way. I forgot the exact number, but it seems to be something like 40, maybe a higher percentage, maybe 60% failed. But some succeeded. But that's the model. That's the model of the U.S. empire controlling nations around the world. And Russia said no. And Russia said no to the U.S. empire controlling Ukraine. Remember, the U.S. installed Zelensky after the Maidan Revolution, or whatever you want to call it, 2014, pushed the pro-Russia government out of Ukraine and then later on installed Zelensky. This was all controlled by Victoria Nuland in the State Department and the Obama-Biden regime. This category of people, Jake Sullivan and others. And that's the model they've used for the whole world. That's coming to an end. And don't forget, by the way, that the West has said, hey, we have stolen $300 billion in Russian assets held in mostly euros in Western banks, mostly European banks. And we want to steal that money. We want to take it. They've already decided they're going to take the interest on that money, which is billions of dollars a year, and then use that to, quote, fund Ukraine, which means it's just going to be bribes and kickbacks and payouts and pocket stuffing operations for all the people involved, because it's a giant fraud scheme. The whole Ukraine war funding scheme is really, it's a giant money laundering operation for the West. And that's why they want to keep Ukraine in play. Not because they care about Ukraine or the Ukrainian people, but because they need the money laundering.
What's up?
in place. And Russia is thwarting that. Russia is defeating Ukraine, and Russia itself has
this
not
dude's
been defeated.
been waiting for a minute on this
Russia
painting.
is flourishing. It is outproducing the West in terms of its manufacturing capabilities, its domestic economy,
How do I type
its
a message?
currency, its international trade is exploding. It's selling energy to countries like India and many other countries around the world. And so it has not been defeated.
Can I write
So
back? Can I
as
write a
this
message back?
war conflict gets underway, this is a situation where the West, i.e. mostly the U.S. empire, versus the East, which right now is mostly Russia, but also includes China, sort of adjacent to Russia. This war will escalate out of control because this is the final war for victory, dominance over the world's economy. Now, have you ever had some friends who were a couple, let's say, and then they had a nasty breakup, like a really nasty breakup where they went into psycho revenge mode? You know, like the guy's like, you know, I'm leaving you, woman, and then the woman's like, I'm gonna set your car on fire, you know, and then the man is like, I'm gonna send a hate mail to your boss and get you fired, and then the woman is like, you know, I'm gonna release a live skunk in your living room, you know, whatever, and this kind of stuff back and forth. It's like an all-out war with all kinds of spite, right? This is an example, or kind of a metaphor of what's happening internationally. These are not minor things. This is an all-out war for the future control of the world economy and world trade. And the simple truth of the matter is the U.S. empire is failing because nobody wants to deal with dollars anymore. Nobody wants to be sanctioned by the sanction-happy, trigger-happy USA that has sanctions on virtually every country in the world in one form or another. And they're always announcing new sanctions as if they control the world. The world is tired of that. The U.S. is going to lose control over global trade. It's going to lose naval dominance over global trade routes, that is, the cargo ships around the world. Already, I mean, if you don't believe me, already the U.S. has lost control over the Red Sea. So this is a game right now between the East and the West where it's all or nothing. You know, winner take all. That's what's shaping up right now. And as a result, there's nothing that both sides won't do in terms of escalation in order to emerge victorious. Russia knows that if it does not win this fight against NATO and the West, that it will cease to exist as a nation. The United States knows that if it does not defeat Russia, that it will cease to exist because it will be seen as weak and it will lose its dollar hegemony, it will lose its ability to project power with credibility, and as a result, it will lose influence and control over the world, and especially as more nations move away from the dollar and into BRICS currencies, the U.S. empire loses its ability to weaponize sanctions against everybody. So this is a fight for everything. And for that very reason, the escalation will almost certainly go nuclear. And what you're going to see is sort of an escalation ladder, as it's sometimes called in military circles. You'll see, well, for example, the U.S. using F-16s given to Ukraine, but clearly piloted by Western pilots in order to launch missiles deep into Russia. Then Russia will probably respond by launching, let's say, hyperbaric bombs at Western military bases in Poland or Romania or wherever those F-16s ultimately took off from. Well, then the West is going to say, oh, you can't attack our air bases. We're going to hit you with something bigger, something harder. So the West launches some medium-range missiles and hits targets in Moscow, for example, or deeper into Russia. And then Russia's going to respond with something even bigger. Oh, here's some Iskander missiles, like, right up your rear end. Starts hitting logistics hubs, ammo depots, like deeper into Europe. And you can see how this goes back and forth. And then at some point, somebody says, well, let's just use a small nuclear detonation, or maybe like nuclear artillery, or a nuclear warhead on a missile, but a warhead that's relatively small, like 1 kiloton or something. And they'll think, this is just going to be a tactical nuke. It won't lead to escalation. It'll probably be the West doing this. But that will set the precedent that, oh, now we're in nuke territory. From there, the nukes just get bigger. Oh, that was a 1 kiloton nuke. Well, how about a 10 kiloton nuke? How about a 500 kiloton nuke? Oh, and then we're going to respond to that. Oh, and it's a 1 megaton nuke now. Okay. Oh, you're using 1 megaton nukes. Well, we've got 10 megaton nukes. Oh, boom, boom, back and forth, mushroom clouds. Civilians start getting killed by the hundreds of thousands. Radiation fallout starts to become a major concern. This is how it can go. And then at some point, both sides probably figure that the best play in terms of game theory is to launch everything you have now, to obliterate your enemy, and to do it as soon as possible and hope you have the element of surprise. Like that game theory, or 2 scorpions in a jar, that's what very quickly emerges. And there's no method to de-escalate that I'm aware of, at least not one that the West would participate in. And Putin is not willing to let Russia be used as a nuclear target pad by the West. Russia is willing to put up with a lot and has so far been very reluctant to escalate in many ways. But if the West starts launching nukes at Russia, it's game over. Then you're going to see probably thousands of nuclear warheads headed towards, well, Western Europe in particular, and probably against the United States. Western Europe will be obliterated. Its cities will be ghosted. They will vanish in mushroom clouds. They will turn to ash under this scenario. Western Europe will be history. The United States will fare better, and maybe, if we're lucky, nukes won't strike U.S. cities. But they probably will. So this is what people need to prepare for. And you're seeing right now the early steps of this escalation ladder. You're watching it take place. And there is no off-ramp to this that I can see. So plan accordingly, take this seriously, and watch my 90-minute special interview with Steve Quayle. It's called The Sum of All Fears is Here. That's posted right now on Brighteon.com, my channel, HR Report. Again, it's called The Sum of All Fears is Here. And check that out. Give it a listen. Heed the warnings. Get prepared in every way you can. Food, medicine, backup money supply.